What's up everyone, it's Endymion, and the saga surrounding Warhammer 40k is now reaching new heights, and we've now entered the part of the controversy where goalposts are being shifted in order to fit new agendas while they hope you don't notice. From one website saying Warhammer is sexist towards women, a former writer of White Dwarf attempting to double down but only making things worse, and how Henry Cavill might be responsible for this mess to begin with. And then at the end, I want to look at another victim of Sweet Baby and show that what's happening to Warhammer is what's happening to other companies, and what the real human cost behind all of this ends up becoming. Firstly, let's look at Games Radar with their article titled "How to Stop a Teenage Girl from Playing Warhammer." This article comes from writer Abigail Shannon, who attempts to claim that her personal experience with Warhammer proves that the hobby is tied to misogyny and sexism. She starts off her article saying playing video games has always been a struggle as a woman, so the victim mindset is already in full swing from the get-go. She explains how she would have to turn off her microphone when playing online games to hide that she was a girl. And this somehow was one of the original sins of gaming, that a woman could not speak during a multiplayer game. Yet in all of my experiences of playing video games, I would hear people of all backgrounds and genders speak when I gamed, and nobody cared. Sure, once in a while you'd hear some desperate mouth breather say something along the lines of, "Oh my god, it's a girl playing a video game," but you can just mute those particular people and then just continue on your way. The majority of people don't care, and in most online spaces, people are going to care far more about your ability to play an online game and actually win matches than worry themselves on what's between your legs. But like I said, from the get-go, we got the victim mindset. She then tries to paint Warhammer 40k tabletop games stripping her and other women like her of their usual anonymity because they have to be present while playing it, which means their face and physical self are there as well while they play, which again, yes, that is true. But she paints the concept of Warhammer 40k as being this prison of sorts that she has to put herself into in order to enjoy the tabletop version. But the reality is that if you just buy the tabletop game and play with people you know in your own space like your house or room, then what's the issue? Sure, maybe your very first game of Warhammer that you may introduce yourself into was within a store is a little nerve-wracking. But the likelihood is that anyone else engaging with that entry-level game is just like you, a newbie. And there's nothing wrong with that, and what I hate about articles like these is they paint the picture that an entire fandom is somehow sexist based on the experiences of this one person who wrote an article. And for all we know, she could be lying and none of this actually happened, but we have to just take her word for it. Regardless, I doubt most people immediately start playing the full-blown Warhammer 40k tabletop game right away, since obviously most people will take their time to paint their miniatures and such before that even happens. So already just mere paragraphs into this article, and Games Radar's journalist here is trying to say that gaming and hobby spaces in general are toxic towards women, which I don't doubt is real to some extent. She says when she first visited a Warhammer shop when she was 15, the people working there were cold and misogynistic, and she felt insulted that her lack of knowledge on Warhammer was intact instead of being fostered. But she also proves in her own article that instead of combating this guy's moronic statements, she walked away insulted instead. And then she never visited a Warhammer store until 2023, where she said she took on the role of the uninterested girlfriend while secretly listening and absorbing information while hiding behind her boyfriend who was talking to the shop clerk. If you ask me, this entire article just sounds like this Abigail Shannon person is afraid of confrontation and scurries away at any sign of pushback, which makes it equally ironic that of all the jobs she would pursue, she chose a video games journalist of all things. The point here is that a lot of these articles are popping up all over the internet from all kinds of websites, and they are all attempting to paint the fanbase at large as this sexist group of terrible individuals who are not open to the hobby allowing new people, when in truth this is anything but, as Abigail Shannon here attempts to claim that Warhammer has kind of always been a male club and male-centric, which yes, it kind of has been because that's how marketing your products work. This would be like me, a straight man, walking into Sephora while knowing nothing about makeup. And the women who work there are like, do you even know what you're looking for? And then I just get insulted and I run away crying because they insulted me. Instead, you just ask people questions like a normal person and then you get answers in return. Any journalist would know this, and if any friction stops you from entering something, you're probably just not a right fit for those places. And this then opens up that whole other conversation of why gatekeeping is kind of important within these spaces to begin with. Because of course we have the female custodies nonsense happening and Games Workshop in general working to make their environment more inclusive. But the truth is that the reason why Warhammer fans in general are so headstrong and against changes is not because they're sexist bigots, but simply because they've seen already what happens when you let people into these spaces that clearly aren't there for the right reasons. What a lot of people, like this Abigail and others, is they want the environment and community of various franchises to change in order to fit their ideals, which goes directly against the concept of entering a fandom to begin with. Users like this person unironically called Lord of Change, who said Warhammer should not be about war at all, but instead, in their own words, romance should be the center of every 40k novel, they're so boring otherwise. Ah yes, the franchise Warhammer, which has war in its name, should instead become Lovehammer, because they don't fit the Lord of Change's ideals, to which another user then replied, human relations overall, honestly, the uncaring killing machines get boring really fast otherwise. These two people here clearly are wanting to enter Warhammer not to engage with and enjoy the community, but instead they wanted to change to fit their ideals. Like Abigail Shannon, these are not the sort of fans you want in these spaces. Not because of their gender or anything, but simply because they truly believe everything should be changed to fit what they like. Which makes no sense and proves why gatekeeping has been pushed so heavily since the whole female custody situation. Cause it's clear, like any other franchise ruined before it, the activists are eyeing Warhammer next. And they're hoping that over years they can alter and destroy the legacy of what that series meant to so many, which is the perpetual drive of war and destruction, and replace it with romance and identity politics instead. Which makes you of course then ask the question, why bother attempting to join something like Warhammer if by definition you dislike everything it's about anyways? The answer is of course simply because every other franchise has largely bent the knee to what these activist-minded individuals want already. So if Star Wars, Marvel, and so many others can do it, then why can't Warhammer? And I find it disingenuous and downright disrespectful to want to alter the entire identity of a franchise the moment you enter it. In a lot of ways, think of Warhammer or any other franchise like its own country with their own principles, rules, and so on. You can let the new players in, but once they enter the country, they suddenly want to change everything about the country into where they came from, which ultimately just brings the same issues they were likely running from the new place they came to, creating a perpetual cycle of nonsense. Instead of respecting the society and rules of Warhammer or country, the activists are uninterested and care little about it and want it to change instead. That just feels wrong to me and downright disingenuous, and when articles like these ones are made, they do nothing but push the idea that gatekeeping must be abolished. Simply because little ol' Abigail of Games Radar here can't handle confrontation in a store where someone who's paid to help her gave her a little attitude. My answer to all of this is that you actually have to gatekeep even harder, especially now. Don't allow just anyone to enter your spaces if they are coming in with the idea that everything must be changed to fit their moronic ideals. It's the Helldivers 2 give us an LGBTQ+ rainbow cape situation, but on a whole much larger scale. What Warhammer should be doing is keeping themselves apolitical like Helldivers has done as well. I've obviously done videos in the past about Helldivers and how users have attempted to strong-arm Arrowhead Studios into implementing real-world symbolism into that game. And smartfully, Arrowhead has said no to every request. There won't be any rainbow flag capes, no Make America Great Again armor, or any other real-world symbol. Because if they did that and caved in, then Helldivers 2 would be facing the same backlash Warhammer is right now with female custodies and these activist morons. Because like always, it's the classic give an inch, take a mile mindset. You give them female custodies now, but what's next? Now that they know that you're willing to bend the knee, they're going to keep pressing until every joint in your body has bent every which way in order to appease them. Mark my words, dear viewer, female Space Marines will happen eventually. Even though Space Marines are very much lore-wise similar to Witchers and only men can become these things, but when you let in a bunch of activists who want love and cuddles in a franchise called Warhammer, you get what you deserve ultimately. And we're already seeing the changes happen. I mean, just look at the Wikipedia pages of Warhammer right now. Prior to all of this, if you looked up Adeptus Custodians on Warhammer's wiki, it would say this: "These men are my bodyguards. Their lives forfeit to the guarantee of my physical safety. Of their loyalty to me there shall be no question nor doubt. I and I alone shall have the authority to stand in judgment over them. No other commander shall they have in battle nor in service. None shall bar them from me, and none shall hamper or stall their mission. So it is decreed, as said by the Emperor of Mankind during the Age of Strife." Well, that's not what it says anymore. If you look at it now, these men have been changed to these warriors. Because of course, since female custodies apparently exist, that means the Emperor of Mankind has to now refer to his custodians in a gender-neutral term like warriors now. The changes don't stop there either. Looking further down, it says here the Custodes is an elite cadre of genetically engineered transhuman male and female warriors. So there it is, the lore is now changed, the goalposts moved, and the inches have started to become miles in mere days that are taken. You see what happens when you don't gatekeep your hobbies, fellas? They get taken over by people who have no respect for the franchise in particular to begin with. They won't stop till the Emperor of Mankind is a woman or non-binary, and I guarantee you characters that were male in the lore will become women of diversity as well in the Amazon Prime show. Of course, that story about the changes being done thanks to Amazon are starting to hit other websites like that Park Place with theirs titled, "Rumor, Games Workshop introduced female Adeptus Custodes for Amazon's upcoming Warhammer 40k series with Henry Cavill." And of course, like I previously reported, these changes are allegedly only being done in order to appease Amazon when it comes to their contractual agreement with Games Workshop. Apparently, some more stuff got unearthed, and there's some victim blaming behind the scenes from that 4chan post that started the rumor. Apparently, Henry Cavill jumped the gun on the announcement of Warhammer at Amazon, and this scared Games Workshop because the deal was nowhere near being finalized. But Cavill was parading around as if the ink was already dry and the choices were already made. According to that same leaker, they said, nothing was inked when Cavill announced it, and it sent everyone at Games Workshop into a panic. Shareholders put an immediate stop to any work until the contract was hammered out and the negotiations were brutal. If it could impact profits on the minis, Games Workshop didn't want to touch it, which is why this Custodes thing was a dumpster fire. People who should have known about it didn't, and success or not, people are going to be let go. And when I was on Flashcast this weekend, Flash had Arch on the live stream too, so I got to ask him some questions about Warhammer, and he echoed the same story as well. That the deal was not finalized before Henry Cavill said what he did on the series existing and all of that. So what some are gathering from this rumor leak is that Henry Cavill is to some extent to blame for the existence of female Custodes, and the very poor deal Games Workshop has signed onto when it came to their franchise being turned into what it is going to become on Amazon. Because of that bad deal, Games Workshop has allegedly much less power in what exactly happens with the live-action series, which is why Amazon was able to get the existence of female Custodes to be retconned and implemented into the lore prior to signing the deal. But apparently it goes beyond this too, as there was some more stuff leaked from the same source. Again, take it as rumor, but it's getting spoken about everywhere. Anyway, the leaker then said that the reason why female Custodes exist in the first place goes beyond the fact that Amazon wanted more representation. And actually, Amazon's higher-ups, when reviewing the source material, didn't like the concept of the Sisters of Silence because they don't speak. I mean, it's in their name after all. And of course, in the eyes of progressive companies making media to boost their ESG score, the concept goes against their tenets. So you want them to adapt a group of women who don't speak? That's sexist apparently, and very problematic. But beyond that, Amazon apparently also doesn't like the Sisters of Battle either, because they are, in Amazon's own words, too religious. And of course, in the ever-growing push for wokeness in every regard, religion, especially that of Christianity or Catholic faith, is seen as problematic in the eyes of many creatives across the globe when it comes to media being made. So essentially, based on what I'm seeing here, Amazon hated every female option they had available to them in terms of being lore accurate to what Warhammer 40k is. They would either get a group of silent women or women who are pro-religion, which are sacrilegious in their eyes. And you already know some games journalist or blue-haired armpit woman with 5 personality disorders would watch that potential Warhammer live-action series and see that the women are either trained to be silent or pro-religion, and their liberal-infested brains would explode in a frenzy. And then the articles would pop up, why the Sisters of Silence are problematic and the product of toxic masculinity. And then Amazon's higher-ups would go, oh, we screwed up, the press hates us, and then they would run damage control and apologize. Everything I explained would have been fine if it was made 10 or so years ago, but in today's far more insane era, these concepts are something that just can't exist anymore. Women are not supposed to submit, gender doesn't exist apparently, and Christianity and Catholics are evil in the eyes of these woke crazy people. But of course, every other religion is fine, just not the ones that are largely supported by white people. Because white people are evil after all, which is beyond stupid, but that's what this world has come to. So the leaker finishes by saying that ultimately, based on all the avenues Amazon had available to them when it came to female representation, none of it made them happy. So they used the already bad deal that Games Workshop was being strong-armed into and gave Amazon even more free creative control over the IP. And then this leaker would say the female Inquisitor in power armor was the last hope, but Amazon wants to be able to take the character out of the armor and still have them be powerful. It's all been a massive headache. So it's clear all of this nonsense started because of this bad deal Games Workshop made with Amazon, and unfortunately what should have been a massive win for Warhammer fans has turned into yet another potential Rings of Power situation. God help me. Obviously, as far as we know anyway, Henry Cavill is still involved. Well, as of the making of this video anyway. But Games Workshop has apparently said internally via this leak they have absolutely zero plans to make any female custodies available physically to buy or anything like that. Because they obviously know that those would not sell well whatsoever and would just be a waste of creating in the first place. And I wouldn't be surprised if people lost their jobs over this really bad deal that got finalized, because this move will cost Warhammer money and fans in the long run. Sure, they'll likely gain some fans akin to Fallout's Prime show, but it's a different beast here entirely. Warhammer is not meant to be progressive. It's not supposed to represent our timeline right now in any way. It is obviously in its name within the 40,000 timeline, so any of the concepts we're dealing with now are ancient problems in Warhammer's universe. The reason why people love that universe is because it's a unique blend of religious fanaticism, war, and brutality. It's almost as if in the future of mankind, the socio-political ideals of our world have been reduced and replaced by the ways of old. Gone are social media influencers or other nonsense like that, and all that remains is the unified, glorious might of an emperor wielding the power of an entire race in order to spread the glory of the Imperium across any planet their light touches. There's something beautiful in that, simple even. And I think Warhammer would benefit staying true to itself and taking a page out of Helldiver's book and just keeping the game's world separate from the outside influences. Because escapism is clearly important, and I don't think Warhammer fans would enjoy some female custodian asking for the pronouns of other soldiers. Because in reality, if someone asked that in Warhammer, they would be answered with a shotgun blast to the face or worse for spewing heresy. But that's what's apparently being said here, which is that, in a sense, allegedly, Henry Cavill is kind of to blame for this mess by jumping the gun with all of this. So what do you think about all of that? Let me know in the comments. Now let's move on to that former White Dwarf magazine writer Nick Davis. I covered his previous response in another video, but he has since then responded. Too long didn't read version. Basically, Nick Davis tried to say having female custodies is fine because Warhammer's lore is based on unreliable narrators, and obviously fans tore him a new one. So Nick is back again, this time to try to explain himself better. He said, and I quote, "Okay, let's try this one more time. I'm not devaluing anyone's experience of the gaming hobby, and I cannot talk to whatever Games Workshop does with their social media or any other decision. Even when I worked for them on White Dwarf, I was never in a position of any influence beyond any goodwill I may have garnered with my work and sharing my joy of the hobby over the years I was there. The primary point of my post on Tuesday is don't let the lore get in the way of having fun with your friends. I've been around Games Workshop games since Warhammer 1st Edition. I've seen the games and universe around them change many times. Two examples: when the Custodians were introduced in Rogue Trader 40k 1st Edition, they were just skinny guys in cloaks and masks, armed with a laser rifle in the shape of a lance, and they never ever left the Imperial Palace. In many ways, they were never meant to be a playable army, and RT was more about skirmish action than full-blown army action. Another example, that in Warhammer 2nd Edition, you could take a day trip to Lustria and pick up bolt guns that were just laying around on that continent, and the then Amazons who also inhabited the Lustria had access to a lot of suspicious looking 40k tech. Wonder what happened to those Amazons and bolt guns appearing in the Warhammer world? The concept of the gaming lore, which I may have explained poorly, but I never expected my defensive inclusion and just having fun with your games to blow up like it did, is the lore should be considered a mythology and never an absolute. We only have to look at our own history for precedent, as that has changed in its definition and discovery all the time, and the worlds Game Workshop created are treated in the same way. Unreliable narration is baked in, as it should be, because the history of the universe is so vast that something always will be forgotten. This was deliberate to give you, the gamer, a sandbox to shape as you will. This also gave Games Workshop leeway to introduce cool new things. Remember, the Tau did not exist in the 2000s, and the Necrons were only given form back in the mid-90s. And they started as Eldritch Horrors to throw as a surprise third force in your games, and let's not talk about the squats, I mean Votans. All I wanted to do is express the core of what I feel is important about the hobby. Inclusion is a good thing, and the game is about community, joy, sharing, being social, and throwing buckets of dice at your mates as you frag them with an Imperial Guard, sorry, Astra Militarum firing line. I hope this explains a little more about my thoughts. Now go play some games with your mates, paint some toy soldiers, build some terrain from what you find in the dumpster, and have fun. Play well, my friends." End quote. While what Nick Davis says here sounds well and good as he attempts to wash his hands clean of the controversy, many are saying that he's laying down and taking it in order to appease to the activists. As one user responded by saying, "That's a lot of words just to say you missed the point. Has Star Wars gotten better as a franchise or worse since the Disney takeover?" To which Nick Davis replied, "Disney, that has built the fortune on kids media, takes over another franchise that built its fortune on kids media. I would say Star Wars is the same storytelling quality it was before Disney bought it." Yeah, no, Nick, Star Wars after Disney bought it is nowhere near the same level of storytelling or world building compared to what George Lucas did prior. You can just tell this guy is the epitome of "I agree with the current thing" to a T. He just doesn't want to step on any toes. It's this kind of mentality that leads to many hobbies and franchises like Star Wars becoming absolute garbage in record time. Because people like Nick don't push back, they don't ask questions, they just open the door and smile while their entire house gets looted and lit on fire with him still inside of it. Then a user says in response to his "Star Wars is fine" comment by saying, "Okay, so follow me here. Can you see why fans were upset at the horrible writing in the sequels? Example, somehow Palpatine returned." To which Nick Davis said, "I never saw the last Star Wars movie, life got very busy for me, and I've not found the time to watch it. So I can't comment on it. I am watching Shogun, so I can talk about that, or Rick and Morty just finished the last season." So clearly Nick telling you that Star Wars' storytelling is the same level as its peak days can't be taken with any merit. This is simply a guy who rolls over and lets people walk all over him as long as he's not labeled a bigot, and it's sad to see. Always pathetic when people have zero drive or morals when it comes to anything. They just look at what's socially acceptable no matter how crazy or batshit insane it is, and they go, "Yeah, that's my opinion so the mob doesn't attack me." It's pathetic, there's no other way to put it, but it's okay. That's why me and other people who cover these things are here, because I'll tell you what Nick is afraid to say. The truth is, these people infiltrating Warhammer, Star Wars, and more are insane people who hate everything and want their hate and insane ideals to be reflected in everything they interact with. And if any pushback is given to their claims, they will attack you, tear you down, and force you into submission until you're begging for mercy. Warhammer should never become any version of Lovehammer like these people want. And lore is important, despite Nick Davis rolling over like a dead sea turtle here when he's faced with backlash. If lore, quality, and integrity don't matter when it comes to a franchise, then that franchise is dead and has fallen alongside the others. And the only logical way forward is to close your wallet and laugh as a sinking ship continues to fall apart as they scream for help. Sure, you'll get called a bigot and some form of phobic, but hey, that's what you get when you tell the people who would have saved you that you don't want them anymore. This is a colossal failure in Games Workshop as well as the people they employ to safeguard their sacred franchise. And if this is the level of respect they're willing to give when it comes to these things, then they should expect nothing less than the lack of respect from the fans in return. You did this to yourselves. I hope your company has savings because you're gonna need it. Also, 3D printing exists, by the way, so fans don't even need Games Workshop to supply them with miniatures anyways. Finally, let's end with that Sweet Baby story, which ties into this Warhammer nonsense too. From that Park Place, we have this article titled, Sweet Baby Inc. reveals dev team behind Shadow Gambit The Cursed Crew shut down, costs were exceeding revenues. Sadly, another game studio is shut down after their game has failed, which coincidentally was consulted by Sweet Baby Inc. This news is actually from last year, but nobody heard about it until now. Here's what Sweet Bing Bong Baby said on their LinkedIn about this closure. We are saddened to learn that Shadow Gambit The Cursed Crew is Mimi's last game. We're incredibly proud to have helped bring this final voyage to shore by collaborating on the game's protagonist Afia with Matthias Kraut, Moritz Wagner, and the rest of the crew at Mimi Games. Our collaboration helped make the world of the Cursed Caribbean feel more inclusive and representative. Very happy to see that players have resonated with the game as evidenced by its incredible reception. The Mimi team is amazing and deserves to land on their feet. We would be happy to connect folks in our network who are looking for talented developers with the studio. Send us a DM if you are interested. It's insane to me that even in the face of an entire game studio closing down and everyone losing their jobs, Sweet Baby has the audacity to say players resonated with the game and had an incredible reception. But that's not true. On Steam alone, here's the actual player counts. They had an all-time peak of just over 3,000 players, and barely had over 100 players per day since then at best. This is not good numbers for any game, especially one that has servers where costs have to be maintained. Here's what the devs said about all of this and the closure. Making these games was amazing and extremely taxing at the same time. Reaching the level of quality Mimi strives for is hard and requires focus and dedication. We also have to acknowledge that our future production costs are growing faster than potential revenues of the genre. The increased financial pressure and level of risk became unsustainable. So the game clearly was not making enough for them to keep supporting it in the long run. So the studio died, the game is pretty much dead now too, but in Sweet Baby's eyes it was a win because they made the Caribbean more inclusive and diverse, I guess. You see what I mean when you chase things in games nobody cares about? They don't talk about the quality of the gameplay or anything, just inclusivity. This is what's happening to Warhammer as well as many other franchises right now. And when any of these franchises go up and die, it'll be the same nonsense reason. Well, we lost billions in revenue, everyone is jobless, but hey, at least we weren't racist, I guess. Too bad thoughts and prayers won't keep your lights on, and for this studio, Mimi, it's over officially for them. They died and Sweet Baby killed them. How can you not look at the corpses of studios laid around you and not realize that every studio that fell to ruin has only one thing in common, which is your moronic consulting firm in the form of Sweet Baby? But this is what they see as progress and as a massive win for gaming somehow. And the same is happening now with Warhammer. Sure, their stocks are plummeting and fans are canceling subscriptions en masse, but at least we're being more inclusive to a community that won't support us in any meaningful way in the future. Whether it's journalists claiming Warhammer excluded them for their gender, the alleged Henry Cavill comments leading to the downfall of Warhammer and the bad deal, Nick Davis being a pushover, and another company dying by virtue, it's all so tiresome. All of this could have been avoided if you just rejected ideology and instead made great games, but they're unwilling to do so, and now we have the nonsense and garbage that we gotta sift through. At this point, we're like firefighters after a house burns down, trying to decipher what caused the inferno to begin with. I hope the thought of knowing you were inclusive helps you sleep at night, as your profits and the very people who depended on the work your company generates burns to ashes because you decided to be a moron and chase woke ideology. As always, thank you for watching, like, subscribe, and share the video, and thanks to all my patrons for their support. This is a massive mess, but I thank you for being here. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one.